it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be on this stage talking to you. And I really have to be honest, it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to speak about. After all, this is a big idea talk. And here I am, like, what can I say that's a big idea? Something that you've never heard that could be impactful. And literally, this is no lie. So Rich and Regular, who had their big talk, Kirsten and Julian, yesterday, which was amazing, they put out on Twitter a couple weeks ago, they were practicing their speech, and it was going great. And I literally, when I saw that, I was like, ooh, it's time for me to actually pick a topic and write my speech. And literally I responded, and I think they thought I was playing. I did not have my speech, I did not have a topic. Because I really didn't know what I wanted to say. And it's not because I didn't have any ideas. I had the complete opposite problem. I had 2 ideas. And see, that's the thing. I had this idea that what I wanted from this speech was you to think that this was the most impactful thing you've heard at this conference. I wanted a standing ovation. I wanted you to request autographs. Okay, maybe not autographs, but I really wanted you to hear a big idea. So, think about it, I was thinking too big. With me thinking too big, left me stuck. My big, audacious goals only led me to feel like I couldn't move forward. Focusing on the end in mind just kept me in one place. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about our desire to have more, to want more, to make a big impact, our big vision. Sometimes not understanding how to get there keeps us not moving. And so, instead of being on the field, playing to our best ability, we stay stuck as spectators. And instead of thinking big, I want to talk about why it's important to think small. Why it's important to instead begin with the end in mind. We should begin just with the beginning in mind. Just begin. I'm also going to talk about how thinking small led me to big results in my life and business, and how you can evolve from spectator to industry leader. Now listen, I'm so proud of this next slide with Michael Jordan, and we have it here. My husband is going to be so proud of me because I found a way to put NBA basketball player in a finance speech. But I'm putting this here because a lot of us are spectators, or we start as spectators, and we want to move on to that first round draft pick, the person that gets asked to do things like this. And so we're going to talk about how that can be possible. Now, again, my name is Jamila Souffrant. You already know that. I have a podcast called Journey to Launch. You already know that. And I call the people on this journey with me journeyers. So do we have anybody in here that's a journeyer that listens to the podcast? Yay! And listen, hopefully if you're not a journeyer yet, I can convince you to become one after this talk. But really, my journey into entrepreneurship, and I'm going to talk about that, started from really humble beginnings. And now the podcast has over 2.7 million downloads. It won Podcast of the Year at the Plutus Awards last year. And my little company, which is really a company of one, is on target in 2021 to have gross revenue of just under $500,000, which is kind of crazy because, how? And we still have a couple months left in the year, so maybe we can hit the $500,000 mark or more. Who's counting? And I'm not saying this to brag. I really just want to, it's not a bad thing to brag, by the way, and toot your own horn. But it's really just to give you perspective of how far I've actually come in this space. And so just because I'm talking about thinking small does not mean you can't dream big. And I wanted to just give you some examples of me dreaming big and it coming actually true. So in 2017, I went to my first podcast movement. I had just started the podcast, and I wasn't a speaker. Basically, after a session was over, I kind of snuck on stage and had someone take a picture of me, and I tweeted this, and I said, one day I want to speak at Podcast Movement. Next year, they asked me to speak. This obviously is more recently, but in 2020, I put out a tweet and said, my dream project is to work with a brand or company on some podcast or video production. And literally, it's happening. Next week, the Modern Life podcast launches to the world. I'm so excited and thrilled to be on that project. And even this, 2018, I came to my second FinCon. And I remember leaving and being so inspired by the speakers. And I put in the FinCon group, hey, what are you guys looking who do you look for to be a big idea speaker or a keynote? Literally, you can read it there. And I let it go. I put that in the air. And here I am, almost 3 years later, being asked to speak on this stage. All right, so what am I, a clairvoyant? I'm not a psychic, like I promise you. For me, these things are happening because yes, I dream big, but I think small. And I take small, deliberate actions every day to get to my goals. So I want to give you a timeline of what it has been like getting to my goals, and hopefully you can find yourself in this journey. And I call these like the stages of getting through the industry and becoming a serious industry leader. So from 2014 to 2016, I was what you call a industry spectator, or just observer. I was on the sidelines. I, like many of your audience, had a come to Jesus moment, pregnant with my first son in a long commute from hell. It took me 3 to 4 hours to get home that day, and I had a breakdown in the car. I said, this is not gonna be my life. I'm gonna figure something out. And so when I got to a computer, started to Google, how do I quit my job? Anyone put this in Google search before? How do I quit my job? How do I retire early? And I found the world of the FIRE movement, which was life-changing. And so I literally, for those first couple years, I had no intention to have my own blog or podcast. I just was applying what I was learning to my finances. And in doing that, it did start to inspire me to have my own platform. 2016 was when I first put out my first blog post. And it literally was just a blog, and I had an Instagram account. And I started to share how I was applying what I was learning from the podcasts and blogs that I was listening to my life, in hopes that it can help other people. And literally, it was like 5 people reading my blog back in 2016. In 2017, I launched the podcast, and I switched to the podcast because I thought it was an easier format for me to get content out. Writing blogs, I just wasn't my thing. And so the podcast just seemed a better way to try. Now, it was there that I started to morph and transform into a more what I call serious industry participant. See, in 2016, I was still a more casual industry participant. I wasn't taking it as seriously. I wasn't really looking to make a living from it. I had my safe corporate job. But when I started to make more moves and meet more people in the space and attend my first FinCon in 2017, I realized that this could actually maybe be something. And so the serious industry participant stage happened when I doubled down, or when I thought about what my medium could be, which was podcasting, and I took that more seriously. From 2018 and on, I would, if I can so humbly call myself, I've become an industry leader. And so in 2018, I actually quit my job after having my 3rd child. And no, you didn't lose count. I didn't mention that I had another child in that timeline, but there are 3 altogether now. And so with quitting my job, I was able to focus on Journey to Launch full-time. So let's just recap. And I want to know if you can see yourself in one of these stages, right? And for a lot of us, it's a natural progression. For some of us, we don't want to move through the stages. We're fine where we are. But here's how I define that. Industry spectator, observer. That's someone who's just using content as a resource. Maybe it's a form of entertainment. It's what a lot of your audience is doing right now. And if you notice, I have this happen sometimes where I have an audience member who has been around for a while, and because they're inspired or they start getting into it, they want to also now try something of their own. So then the next level is casual industry participant. This is where you're doing something as a side hustle for fun. You're trying it here and there. You're not taking it maybe as seriously. You may make money from it, but it's not your main focus. The next level is serious industry participant. At this stage, you're now seeing some progress. Maybe you're putting in more effort, more hours. You may be making a living, or that is your goal. And then we move on to industry leader. This is where you're not just making a living, you're standing out in the space. You are basically a thought leader. Now, I want to be clear here that industry leader does not mean followers, a lot of followers, or a lot of money. To me, what defines an industry leader is when your community or your peers are viewing you that way. The media attention, the list, being asked to be on a stage like that, this comes later when, as a byproduct, you are putting out good work. So I want to know, or just see, how many of you can identify or see yourself in one of these stages, right? Okay, and so here's the thing. It's really important to be honest about the stage you're in and where you think you want to go. Because what often happens is you come to something like this and you want to hit the ground running as a leader. You want to be a standout. And listen, you should think that way if that's what you want. But oftentimes, it only will keep us stuck because it's hard to go from someone who's just a spectator or to someone who's casually doing this to an industry leader. There is no way that you know exactly how to get from those points, right? And so again, I'm not saying don't strive for it, but if you're striving from it from a point of a lack of resources, time, or energy, it only burns you out. It keeps you stuck. You may be in a season of your life where all you can be right now is a casual participant, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But you gotta be honest with yourself. You gotta be honest with where you currently are, where you possibly wanna be, and if you don't know yet, that's fine too. But it's really the smaller things that you do on a day-to-day basis, that's what gets you ahead. This is not a college curriculum where it's gonna take you a certain amount of courses and/or hours to get through each level. Like, I literally could not have foreseen that it would have taken me a few years to do what I've done. Everyone's journey is different, that's a fact. But the only way to move forward is to take the next step in front of you. Because again, from A to Z, how do you go from A to Z? I don't know, but I can know how to go from A to B if I follow the logical steps. So while starting the podcast, this is what I did. Of course, I wanted more listeners, and I had a vision or goal of getting to 1 million downloads, but on a day-to-day basis, I was not thinking like that. I was thinking, how do I get my first download? How do I get to 10 downloads, 100, then 1,000? I posted this, so this was from my Instagram account, my first iTunes review, and you couldn't tell me that I didn't win a championship when I got my first iTunes review. It was called iTunes back in the day, in 2017. This is what I looked forward to when I started. It wasn't looking at podcasts that had millions of downloads already. I was literally just looking at the next thing for me. This is when I celebrated 5,000 downloads. By the way, check out my cover art. I designed it myself, if you can't tell, back in the day. And things like that. When I got that first 5,000 downloads, you couldn't tell me anything. That was what excited me. And so when people come up to me now and say, well, how do I get to 1 million? I'm like, you're thinking too big. It's not about getting to 1 million. It's about getting to 10, and then 100, and then 1,000. But I gotta be honest. I also thought too big. And I want to be honest with you here because it almost slowed me down to a point where I wouldn't have been on this stage. And I'll explain how. When I first started Journey to Launch, and I still have this vision, I wanted to be more than a podcast. And so at first, when people would say, what's your title? What do you do? Podcaster? I'm like, no, it's more than a podcast. I want it to be a media empire. I want videos, I want articles, I want merchandise. And so thinking that way from the beginning actually slowed me down, because what I started to do was look outward at what everyone else was doing. I started comparing myself to the people who were already media empires, who had a lot of followers. They were doing all the things. I thought I had to do all the things and sell all the things. And literally, I tried all the things. I've tried low-ticket memberships, high-ticket group coaching programs. I've tried ebooks. Basically, me thinking that I had to reach my end goal and thinking with the end in mind from my position point as a beginner made me split my attention. And it also made me almost sacrifice the podcast. I was burning myself out trying to do everything. Again, thinking too big at that time. And so for me, one day I realized if I kept this up, I won't have the energy to do podcasts anymore. The reason why people even like the podcast and my brand, I won't have that energy to bring to them. And so when I realized my schedule was full of meetings I did not want to go to, I was doing webinars of things I didn't want to sell, meeting with people I didn't want to meet, realizing that what did I do to my business? I left my corporate job to get away from that, and here I am creating almost like a prison of my own making. And so I had to get honest with myself. I had to say, listen, I have to do things differently. That's what I started to do. When I doubled down and accepted my role as just the podcaster, that's when things started to pick up. And so what did that look like? Literally, it looked like me saying no a lot often than I used to do. I know in the beginning it feels like you have to do all the things, you gotta hustle, you gotta meet all the people, and I have to admit, that's what I did in the beginning. But after a while, I realized that that was not sustainable. So instead of the year of yes that we hear that people do, it was the year of no, and I'm still doing that now. Turning down opportunities that, yes, would be good for me, but it would take me away from what I should be focusing on. I also had to put blinders on. It's funny, before I went up on stage, I put my phone on airplane mode. And with airplane mode, so it stops messages from coming through, right? And that's what I've had to do more recently. And again, I've seen more progress doing that, because you get so much messaging from other people about what's working, what you should be doing. And so when I started to say, okay, I love you guys, I have a lot of friends in here that I follow, but almost like either not checking the app or putting people on mute if I got triggered by something, that's what I had to do to stay focused, to think small. And then the last thing, I went back to the basics. When I was looking forward to those first iTunes reviews, when I was looking forward to those first 1,000 downloads, it was because I was focusing on the content. It wasn't so murky with all this other noise out there. So when I got back to the content and creating just good work, I was able to focus better. So I want you to ask yourself, as you're thinking, okay, yeah, Jamila, I do want to move forward in my business. I want to move from maybe casual participant to serious to maybe industry leader. But you have to be honest with yourself. What do you actually want to do? Not what other people want you to do, but what do you want to do? What's the thing that you enjoy doing, but your audience also responds positively to? And that's key. And I'm not talking about a big audience. I'm talking about even if 1 or 2 people tell you, wow, that was really good, or give you some great feedback, then you're onto something. And if you don't know yet, it's really important to try. Again, me trying all the things that didn't work or didn't feel good helped me realize really early on, and as I moved forward, what not to do going forward. Also, how do you feel creating it and selling it? That's important. So if you do have a product or service, does it feel good to create and sell? And I'm not talking about being uncomfortable because it's something new. I still feel uncomfortable doing, obviously, certain things. But it's a difference between that and the uncomfortability because it's just not the right fit. And that is something, if you can figure out early on, you'll move ahead faster. And this is really, really important. Are you comparing what you're able to do now, depending on your level, as a casual industry participant to an industry leader and feeling bad about what you're doing? Because oftentimes that will take a toll on your mental health and emotional health, because they have different resources. Even myself, if I compare myself to someone who's getting 20 million downloads a month, that's not going to do good for me, right? And so you have to be really honest with where you are and who you're comparing yourself to. Last thing, we are pretty much logical and analytical people for a money nerd conference, but I also think that this holds us back. It holds us back because while it's great to know the algorithm and what works, I found that when I followed literally what felt good, that's when things started working better for me. So sometimes you have to let go of the numbers and go back to the basics and go within. We're focusing too much, again, on the algorithms, on the stats. Focus on what you're delivering to your audience, on the feedback you're getting. That's what matters. And so if I could just leave you with a few more small ideas, here it is. I want you to put your intentions out there. Again, I'm not talking about not dreaming big. I dream big. I got some big dreams ahead of me that I still want to come true, but you have to do the small work that it takes to get there. Like when you leave this conference and you go back home and you're in your kitchen table, everyone's sleeping, or if you're recording that podcast in your closet like me, hiding from your kids, like that is the real work on a day-to-day basis that you have to do. Next, I want you to be honest with yourself. Where are you on the timeline? Where are you on the timeline, and how much energy, resources, and money are you willing to invest to get you to the next level? And if you're not willing to do that, it's okay, but you be honest with yourself if you are or not. Next thing, double down on what's working for you. Double down on it. Don't look at what other people are doing, what's working for them. What's working for you? Do more of that. Not what's on trend or what looks good for social media, what is good for you. Lastly, this is the most important thing. You gotta be consistent. I've been putting out a podcast episode every Wednesday for the past 4 years. Haven't missed an episode yet, but I might take a break soon. And consistency is key. The content is key. Without content, there is nothing, right? And so here I am. Those are my small ideas, and I hope something that I was said here today will help fuel you closer to your journey. Thank you.